Welcome, everybody. I'm glad to see you again. Wanted to mention that this meeting is sponsored by the New Jersey Antique Radio Club. They are providing the Zoom connection for us, which we really appreciate. I'll start with, because it looks like I sort of settled down in terms of new people that have joined the meeting. Is there anyone who is new that would like to introduce themselves? Well, I guess it sounds like you're all old timers. I'll start with a brief report on the museum. It's humming along very nicely. We have a few more memberships. I haven't looked to see the number right now, but we're gaining several each month. So that's going well. Second thing I want to talk about is that we sent an email out to everybody with a list of sets that we have had at the museum for some of them probably 5 years, I would guess, maybe more, that we put them in every auction we've had and they've never sold. So what we decided to do was those that had good CRTs, we're taking them out and we'll put them in our CRT inventory because I know there'll be buyers for them eventually. And then we offered what's left to anybody who's willing to come and pick them up. I think we have about 30 sets in that category. 3 have been picked up so far. So if you know anyone that's looking for a set, none of the picture tubes are good, but some of them are in pretty nice condition, and they're all 40s and 50s sets. You can, all black and white, by the way. Go to our website and you'll see a link there to the free set. We're considering another swap meet in the first week of October. I don't think the museum will have much to contribute in terms of having an auction, but it just seemed like it would be a good idea to allow people to get together and sell stuff and talk to each other and so forth. So I'm talking to Blake Hinkle about doing that probably the first week in October. We'll keep you informed. And the final thing is I'm working on launching another sweepstakes as a fundraiser. Still haven't settled on a prize yet, but hoping to get that going in the next few weeks, and with maybe having the drawing at the swap meet if we have the swap meet. So that is the report. Financially, we're doing fine. We've got plenty of money in the bank. Donations keep coming in. Attendance is good. Probably picking up some now that people feel safer to come out. Anybody have any questions, comments? Well, I guess not. So let's move on to my tour. And then following that, we'll have a general discussion and talk about whatever you want to. As was mentioned earlier, the topic of the tour this time is mechanical TV. And I thought I'd just run through what we have in our collection. I'm not going to cover everything, but I'm going to cover probably most things. And I'm going to start from sort of at the beginning. I'm going to do this sort of chronologically. Talk about the receivers we have first, or the scanners would be a better description. Then we'll talk about, I'll start with the Nipkow discs sets, and then move on to the other scanning methods that we have. Then talk about the receivers that were used, and about our flying spot scanner that we have in the collection. So Larry, if you can get the camera on the Baird televisor, we'll start there. This is probably the most well-known iconic scanner out there. This was made around 1930. It has a tin cabinet. As nearly as I can tell, there are about 30 or 40 of them in existence. It's really hard to tell because a lot of them are in Europe and England in particular, and our database of European and British sets is very inaccurate, incomplete. We're working on that, but we've had this one for several years. Larry, why don't you go up? This is a 30 line. Go up to the replica up top. We got this some time ago too. This is probably a half scale replica. It's a 30 line vertical scanning scanner. You see the disc there with 30 holes. Because Larry, you're dropping out. I don't know anything. There we go. Now you're back. And what you can see here is that on the far left is a voltage divider resistor for the DC voltage, for the AC voltage for the motor, and then next to it is a rheostat for adjusting the motor speed. And then you see the wheel, which we already talked about. And then in the middle is the motor and synchronizing method. And below it, the framing control. And to the far right is the viewing area. It has a magnifying lens in. It produces a picture maybe 1.5 inches tall and half an inch wide. Now this set there were three types of scanners that were made back in the day. The first is with no synchronization, and we have a couple of examples of that.
Does the replica work at all?
Never turned it on. I think it would. It's pretty darn well made, but we've just never tried it. But there were three types of synchronization used with these mechanical sets. The first was no synchronization. We'll show you a couple of those later. That was the simplest way. A lot of experimenters made sets with you just turned a motor speed control to keep the picture frame. The second system and the earliest system really, I think, was the what they called the phonic wheel or phonic motor system. And what they did is took Larry, go back into that, the synchronizing coils on the back of the, yeah, there you go. There's a wheel connected to the disc shaft that has 30 teeth on it. And on each side is a coil. And what they did was just simply fed video into amplified video with a fairly high voltage output, and fed it into the two coils. And by using the motor speed control and the framing device, well, first using the motor speed control, you'd get the image on the screen, though it wouldn't be locked at first. And then as you got closer to the proper motor speed, the impulses from the video would create a magnetic pull on the teeth of the wheel and slow the disc down so it stayed synchronized. Worked pretty well. It's sort of amazing how well it works. Of course, you can see that video content would determine how good the sync was. If you had no video, if you had just all black you'd have no energy going into the coils, and so the thing would lose sync. But in practice, it doesn't seem to work that way. We have about a 30-second video clip that we play. We use a PC to generate it. We built a PC and designed a software to convert NTSC to 30-line video, it's my son turning his head from side to side. Now there are no periods in it when it goes completely to black, and I wouldn't be surprised. I haven't read anything about this, but I wouldn't be surprised if they were careful to do that in the broadcasting to keep the synchronization, just avoid scenes that were total black. But that's I think around 1,000 of them were made and sold in England. As I say, I think maybe 30, possibly 40 still survive. Anybody interrupt me anytime if they have.
Yeah, this is Wayne.
Yeah, hi, Wayne.
Hi. I saw somewhere that in some cases they would put up a checkerboard pattern in front of the camera instead of going to black.
That makes absolute sense. I had not read that before, but that makes sense.
Hey, Steve?
Yeah.
One question I have regarding this, I know this is going to sound a little archaic, but since these mechanical signals are basically AM radio signals, so to speak, is there a recording that the museum could add as a display so that visitors could, shall we say, listen to what it sounded like trying to tune in a mechanical station, and then what the signal sounded like when, shall we say, centered into tuning?
Yeah, that would be it's a good idea. What we could do is simply use the, I'm not sure we could make it that tuning in and out, but we could certainly put an audio amplifier and speaker there so people could hear what it sounded like. So that's what people that were tuning into television would listen to this particular unique sort of sound. You're right. The early transmissions up until about 1930 were done on the AM radio band, some of them in the shortwave band, and all in a 10 kilohertz bandwidth, because that's one of the reasons the early systems were limited to 30 lines.
Hey, Steve, I got a question about sync.
Yeah.
It looks like it syncs, it has line sync, but not frame sync. Would that be correct?
That's correct. That's what the framing control is. Below, it's a mechanical, it rotates the motor assembly to synchronize it. And once you get it there, it stays there. There's not any drift. Maybe there is over a long period of time, but that's all you had to do. And after you got the motor speed going and you got the line sync from it coming within range of the so that the phonic coils could lock it in. Then the frame sync is just rotating that knob until it was in the proper place.
Thank you.
I wonder if there are any movies from the 20s or 30s showing that thing in operation in somebody's house.
I have not seen that. You probably are aware of a guy named Don McLean, who Baird recorded on phonograph records video signals.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And at the time, the technology didn't exist to play them back, though I read something recently that contradicted that. But I still think it's true that they recorded a number of these discs, and he used computer processing to play them back. I have not seen a video, or I mean a film really, of the sets in operation. I have seen, there are some videos of other sets, but I'm not sure of the Baird. I've not seen one of the Baird set.
I would suspect that it was extremely difficult because of the dim pictures.
Yes. And something I always point out to people when I demonstrate the Baird set is that the picture we're displaying is better than it ever was in 1930. For one reason, we're not relying on a flying spot scanner camera. We're using a PC that's producing a very, very clean signal. And the second reason is that it's wired rather than broadcast. And everybody knows what AM radio sounds like. Any impulse, ignition noise from a car or anything like that, I would think would throw these things out of synchronization. So it had to be incredibly difficult to watch television back then.
Is there a neon lamp in that, or is it LEDs?
That particular one, we have the original neon, which is good, but we've put an LED in place of it just so we don't wear it out. And it produces really about the same brightness of picture, and the colors are pretty accurately done. Peter Ganser, before he died, made that for us.
Would anybody like to see something? Because I have the original material and the books here, how the Baird television studio on Portland Place looked like. And I have it right here, and I can put it right there in front of the lens. That was the flying spot camera. You can see the window in the background. You see the flying spot camera that had a mirror drum in it. And it had a rail, and you could move it right and left on the rail, but you could not tilt it. So you could move it right and left, and the scanner was pretty bright. I think now it's in focus. You can see it. That's the control room of the studio. Do you see that?
Right.
So it's pretty cool. And here we actually have a lady in action inside. You can see there's a carbon grain microphone in the back that's picking stuff up. And down there on the right side, you can see there are the photocells. Do you see that?
Yes.
Picking it up, what comes from the spotlight scanner. And this is how it was done in the very beginning. And now it's going to get interesting because this went up into 1935, and they got a big studio later on. And I want to show you what they actually did in that studio. There's a boxing match being transmitted from that studio. You see that?
Yeah.
And you can see the photocells actually picking up the reflected light from that. And there's a very interesting article about these photocells because they could be placed so that lighting was pretty much simulated as closely as you could with any other stage lighting. So they had a lot of sophistication by that. This all went on AM radio, which was in the United Kingdom limited to 4.5 kilohertz maximum frequency, which means you lost half of the resolution. So what they did to increase the resolution was a boost in the high frequency up to 4.5 kilohertz. So you got a little bit more of the sharpness, but it still was not the same sharpness as they would actually see in the studio, interestingly. However, the transmitter went all the way through Europe, all the way into Italy. And there was an interesting anecdote that they said. They had an announcer on the television station, which came actually from the basement of the BBC. And this guy had a vacation trip in Italy, and he was recognized in a cafe in Italy by people that had watched the television programs from the BBC.
Really? Thank you. And actually, because they used AM radio, and then later they also used some shortwave frequencies for broadcasting. And there are reports of television reception in Australia and South Africa from BBC broadcasts. So, it traveled some distance.
Here's a photo of John Logie Baird in a televisor.
Right. Oh, there you go. There you go. Okay. Let's move on, Larry, to I'm going to show you some examples of disc scanners that we have in the collection. Let's go over to the Hollis Baird receiver with the globe scanner, Larry. No, the Hollis Baird, the one, go further to the left. There you go. Now here's another example. The scanner is made by Globe. I think that's a 60-line scanner. You can see the magnifying glass on the front. And then underneath it is a Hollis Baird receiver. That's the housing for there's the receiver that Hollis Baird, the American Baird, made for television. But that's a synchronous motor. I'll talk about a little bit more about that. Well, might as well now, since we're looking at it. The other approach to synchronizing was to use a synchronous motor and lock it to the power line frequency. Of course, back in the 30s, the power network was not tied together. So, and in fact, there wasn't even uniformity about the frequency used for AC power. So a synchronous approach where the camera was operated on a motor that was synced to the power line, and the receiver would only work within a very limited area, only say within one city or the area right around it. But that was really a superior system. It was, once you locked it, it was not easy to lock it in because you had to adjust a couple of things. But once it was locked in, it stayed in, and that was most of the later systems used when you get into the early 30s, used synchronous synchronization. Okay, let's move over to the Jenkins 100. Yeah, here's another one, and it was very common to sell for the companies to sell these things without cabinets. You could also Jenkins made a kit with a similar design that they sold. There you can see the neon light in the back, and that's a 60-line system that came from, I think, the University of Kansas. Maybe it was Iowa. Larry, go up on the sign. I think it says where that one came from. No, it's not on there. It's on the website. Now go to the Fracaro. This is a really nice looking set. This was made with 30-line horizontal scanning because that's what they were using from Germany and also in Italy back in the early days. Same technology as the Baird vertical scanning, except it was horizontal. And that's by far the nicest looking of our mechanical sets we have in the collection. Now move over to the Western Visionette, if you would, Larry. The Visionette, the one with the wheel on the front. There you go. Okay. Now this is probably the company that made the most sets back in the early 30s, Western Television, which is Sanabria's company. They sold these all over the country and even out of the United States. They made a 50 hertz version. This is synchronous motor sync. The wheel in the front was for framing. Now this, let's go to the Davin tri-standard, right to the left of it. No, the tri-standard to the left. There you go. Okay, now this was a kit set, and the unique thing about it was go up to the disc up top, Larry, the big disc. Don't know if you'll be able to see this, but of course the problem with mechanical television in the U.S. was the lack of standards. There was 24, 36, 48, 45 interlaced, and 60 line were some of the standards that were used. And Davin built this system with almost a 3-foot diameter disc that has 3 sets of holes in it, one for, I think, 24, 48, and 60 lines. Yeah, now you open it up, you can see it inside. And in order to change standards, you would move over to your right. Can you see the 3 holes in the front? Now go to the front of it, Larry. It shows the viewing area. And you can see that you could move the viewing hood to any one of 3 positions, and you'd also have to move the neon lamp in the back to watch different standards. And the final one of the NIPCOW sets I want to show you is the RCA 60 line. This is made, I think, in 1932. And as I understand it, this was made for testing, but the only ones that were sold were to CBS, and CBS used these in their station in New York for viewing their signal. We got this from the Henry Ford Museum. They had 4 of them, and so they had a surplus, and we bought it. And it has a receiver at the bottom. By this time, by 1930, the FCC had allocated a frequency band from around 2 megahertz, then again about 2.8 megahertz for television, with 100 kilohertz spacing between the stations. The top part of it is the power supply and driver circuitry for the neon lamp. You can see the neon in there. This one we demonstrate with the original neon. The meter on there is to adjust plate current, current through the neon so you didn't burn them out. And there's a knob on the front for adjusting that. We have this connected to a, by the way you synchronize this thing, you see at the very top of that, Larry, go down again a little bit. There you go, there's this toggle switch. The way you would synchronize this thing is you'd look through the viewing magnifier and then flick that switch on and off, I don't know how many times, depending upon where you were, until you finally got both vertical and horizontal framing right. Sometimes it takes 20 times turning it on and off. You just turn it off momentarily and back on. And that's how they synchronize them. We have this connected to our flying spot scanner camera, which I'll show you in a bit. This produces a substantially better picture than the Baird does. Now let's go over, we talked about these sets. Go over to the Mercier sets, Larry, the little one first. We talked about these in a previous meeting, but it was very common to make your own scanners, because in its simplest form, all it was a motor, a speed control, a disc, and a neon light, and then, of course, a receiver, an amplifier to drive the tube. So these are a couple of examples. The little one had a standard, they used to sell little like 2-inch magnifying glasses for kids to use and so forth. That was what they used for the magnifier in it. That in front of it is the receiver that was built, also homemade. See their label on the front of it, and the one next to it, the set next to it is well, scan up on the wall to the disc, Larry. This used like about a 12-inch diameter disc, and they made their own. They made a bunch of they made their own with various. We have a whole set of them with every imaginable scanning. They didn't have the 45 line interlaced, but they had all the other scanning standards. They had discs for them. Now the big set, go back down to it, was made a little bit later, and it has no synchronization. Neither of these sets had synchronization. And you can see on the side of that middle wheel, the guy who made this with his father, Murray Mercier, several years ago, we had a chance to interview him. And he talked about building this set and using it. His father was trying to come up with something they could sell. So they rented a store. These are all on our website. There's pictures of them making discs and the whole setup. But he rented a store and built this larger receiver. It's got about a 3-foot disc in it. It's a 60-line disc, but it's not synchronous. Obviously, synchronous wouldn't work because there wasn't a television station in Columbus, Ohio. And that wheel on the side, Murray Jr., he was a junior in high school at the time, told me that every night his job was to sit in the front window of that store. He had a mirror so he could see the screen, and he would turn the wheel to. He called it driving the set, like driving a car, to keep the picture in synchronization, because this was a busy part of town and people walked up and down the street and they got to see their first view of television. His hope, Murray Sr.'s hope, was to sell the sets. Wasn't successful. They moved on to something else. But that was very common, making your own sets. And there were probably way more homemade sets than there were manufactured sets. Nobody knows for sure, but I would think there were several thousand homemade sets, because it was so simple to do in its easiest form. Okay, let's look at any questions? Anybody have any comments or questions?
Steve?
Yeah.
When was the last mechanical scanning transmission made in the U.S., or for that matter, Europe or elsewhere?
Probably 1935 in the U.S. There was a station in Canada that was working. In Britain, there was a mechanical system called Scophony that had 405 line resolution. It was a mechanical system that worked with the 405 line standard. So it was in use in the late 30s, when the BBC started broadcasting 405 line. The Russians were the last country to broadcast mechanical TV, as far as I know, and they were doing it in 1939.
Steve?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is Mark Kovlin in Cedar Rapids. I'll mention, apparently W9XK, an educational station at University of Iowa, claimed that they did 389 broadcasts lasting until June of 1939. So they were really some long-time holdouts.
Well, are you sure that that was all mechanical? Because they got electronic equipment late in their, in the game.
Yeah, yes, I understand. They had the W9XUI.
Yeah.
That was electronic television, but at least from one source that Professor Kurtz of U of I wrote up a book, and he claimed W9XK was through 39 with
the 39. Huh? It's first I've heard that. I mean, it's very possible.
Yeah, but now I should quickly mention that was a book written, I think, in the 60s, so it could be that recollections weren't quite exactly right.
Exactly, right. But it's certainly quite possible. There were.
But the FCC deleted the television assignments down in the 2 megahertz range before 39. We could check that out, I guess.
Yeah.
Steve, where did people in Columbus pick up their signals? If there's no station there, where would they get their signals?
Well, remember the broadcasting, especially at the time that the Merciers were doing it, was AM radio. And it travels great distances. So they picked up, Murray Jr. mentioned that they had picked up Schenectady. In fact, they have one of the things we have is a telegram and letter, a letter they sent to GE saying that they had watched television in 1928 from Schenectady. They also mentioned they watched the Jenkins stations in D.C. and a couple of stations in New York City.
Just like we used to do on AM radio at night, DXing, see what you could pick up.
Exactly. Again, you can imagine the conditions had to be perfect for you to see much of a picture. Okay, let's move on to some of the other scanning methods. The disc was the first, the earliest system. Larry, go in on the Mervyn mirror drum. We don't have a complete set of this, but this is each one of these mirrors was aligned to a slightly different angle, and this drum was rotated. And that's how the scanning was done. And there were a number of people that use this technology, especially in Europe, not so much in the U.S. Now go over to the Hollis-Baird scanner. Over to the left in the corner. There you go. Now this is a drum scanner. Inside of that case, it's not the same technology, but it's what Hollis-Baird, the American Baird, used. And let's move over to the Western Empire State. Now, this was made by Western Television, the same company that made the Visionette that we had on earlier. This uses somebody noticing on their screen, had a picture of what was a Western scanner using this technology. Can't remember who it was.
Yeah, I've got the Model 41.
The Model 41. Okay. This is has a Model 41 scanner inside of it, and it's a lens disc. It has embedded in the disc a series of very tiny lenses, and then behind that is a crater lamp, which is a bright point source of light. Here is the original crater lamp. Again, this operates, but we've taken it out and replaced it with an LED, because I don't know very many crater lamps that still exist. But this is a Model 40. We got the cabinet some years ago, and then we're able to find a Model 41 scanning assembly. So it's not the proper one, but we were able to get it to work. This and the Visionette use a 45-line triple interlace system, 15 frames a second. So that was sort of an improvement. You could in a dark room, you could watch, more than one person could watch television, though the angle, you really had to be within about 20 or 25 degrees of the center of the set to get enough brightness to be able to see. So a couple of people, 2-3 people could watch TV at the same time. And it had in the bottom had the receiver built in. Those bottom 3 knobs are the receiver, and then the speaker is at the bottom.
So, Steve, did the Empire State initially have the same size disc as the 41, or was there any size difference?
I think the disc, the size was the same, but the distance to the screen was different. If I remember correctly, that was the difference. Now, an interesting thing about this set, when we were first getting it going, I had Daryl Hawk, who makes the Aurora converters, has made a whole bunch of custom converters for us in the past, for color sets and for mechanical sets. And so he whipped up a 45-line triple interlace converter. There it is on the top. And we hooked it up and it didn't work. And so went back and forth with Daryl, and after much discussion and experimentation, we discovered that that the Model 41 scanner we had was designed for 50 hertz. It's fairly easy for Daryl to change the converter to work with 50 hertz rather than 60. And what we learned is that Model 41s were sold to Mexico by Western Television, which had 50 hertz power. And that's most likely that Model 41 scanner had come from a set that was being sold to Mexico. Okay, and the final scanning system, at least that we have in our collection, is the mirror screw. And this is sort of an interesting, this is a very tiny one. We got 2 of them from Bell Labs that were donated to us. This one is really tiny. We have a larger one I'm going to be showing you at the end of the presentation. Each one of those, they're metal plates that have the front surface polished. And this was rotated. Again, these were synchronous motor configurations, and had a bar with a light source that covered the whole height of that scanning assembly, and they modulated the light coming out of that bar. And you could stand back, and if you oriented your head in the right place, it produced a really bright, sharp picture. The problem was that people were different about how their eyes worked, I guess, because some people were able to see the picture with both eyes open. Other people had to shut one eye in order to see the picture clearly. And obviously you had to move around, sort of chase the image. Now, once you found it, you didn't have to move anymore. And I'm going to be showing you a unique example of this set that we have at the museum at the end of the presentation. Okay, unless there are any questions or comments, let's go on to the receivers that were used.
Hey, Steve.
Yeah.
Steve, I want to mention that Los Angeles had 50 hertz power in the 30s also.
You're correct about that.
Up till 1948.
Right.
So the set could have come from there, I guess.
I think so. Nobody knows. And we'll never find out, I don't think. The only reason I mentioned Mexico is we know for a fact that they sold sets to Mexico.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, sure. Okay, let's go back to the Davin receiver, Larry. Now, this is a receiver that was built specifically for television. It's AM radio frequency, and it looks identical to AM radios of the time. It's TRF. You can see there are 3 tuning knobs on it, but the difference is that it had a wider bandwidth to take advantage of the full 10 kilohertz that was being broadcast by the television stations at the time. We actually got this thing going and bought one of those cheap little AM transmitters, and were successful in making it work with the Western Visionette. Haven't fired it up since we did it. We did it just for fun. Down below it, you can see the Davin amplifier. There it is. Now, they made a 3-tube and a 4-tube version of this, and this was used for television. Excuse me just a second. I got a phone call. Let me turn it off. Because it is, I turn it off anyway. Not having very good luck turning it off. It'll stop in a minute. But this was designed to take the audio output from a receiver and drive the neon tube. The 3-tube version had a single output tube for the smaller neons. The 4-tube version had 2 tubes in parallel to drive the 2-inch neons that we have. But these were sold to experimenters who built their own sets, and also used by some manufacturers. Obviously, Davin did, and Western used their amplifier, and I don't know who else, but they were everywhere.
I have a question.
Yes.
The batteries, are those emptied out to just for show?
Yes. Yes, they are. We just thought it would be nice to have them in there. We built a power supply to replace the batteries when we had it running. Now, another thing that was done is that, as I mentioned, first of all, in 1930, the FCC allocated those bands in the 2 megahertz region for television. And so a number of companies made converters for use with regular AM radios. Larry, how about going to the Hollis Baird? Well, before you do that, let's go look at the Hollis Baird receiver that's in that main room. Yeah, it's on the bottom there. Yeah, there you go. That's the companion receiver that went with the drum scanner that I showed you above. They sold that both as a factory assembled and as a kit version, same exact set, but one you put together yourself. Now let's go into the, I think it's the other room is the C3-5. There you go. Now, this was an adapter you could buy that went on your AM radio, and it tuned 2 to 3 megahertz to convert that television band to radio. Now, ours is just an empty cabinet, unfortunately, but there are a number of surviving complete converters. And then go back in the other room and to the shortwave converter. Now there's a Jenkins receiver right there, and there is a shortwave converter that was the design for it was in a radio magazine, and again it was designed to convert the 2 megahertz band down to AM radio frequencies. So those are the receivers. You also saw the one from that the Merciers built for their system. A lot of people built their own receivers. A lot of people modified AM receivers they had. Any questions, comments?
Yes, Steve.
Yeah.
One thing I'm curious about is, did Baird of the UK ever export to the United States?
There are a lot of newspaper articles going back to the early 30s where Baird was announcing deals with various broadcasters for introducing his technology in the U.S. As far as I know, that never happened. Now,
okay,
but Baird did export. He made a projection CRT that used 60 kilovolts for theater projection, and did introduce a theater projection TV system in the U.S. in 1939.
Okay, the reason why I was asking is seeing, of course, John Logie Baird and also Hollis Baird. I was wondering if Hollis Baird kept Baird UK out of the U.S. by virtue of using copyright law, not unlike what Philco did to keep Philips of Europe out of the U.S. and why Philips had to use the Norelco brand name here. And also National Radio, the ham radio manufacturer, required National Panasonic, as it was known in most of the rest of the world, to just simply market under Panasonic here in the U.S.
I have not read that anywhere.
I was just curious.
Not that it didn't happen, but in the newspaper articles and magazine articles, I've never heard that mentioned, but that may be. I don't know.
Steve, just a quick question, I guess, jumping forward a bit. The Admiral television I grew up with as a kid had a television converter jack on the back. What would you plug into that jack?
Oh, we'll probably cover that in another tour. That was for the CBS field sequential system. When it was approved by the FCC, a few manufacturers like Admiral put these jacks on the back of their set where you would connect a color scanner to the receiver. But that died out very quickly. Only a few manufacturers did that.
Hey, Steve, I'll mention also that Pete Dexness bought one of those receivers with the colored adapter jack on the back. And I remember I went and picked it up for him, and I brought it out to him at one of the conventions. And he was so excited to look into this thing and see what was in there. And we took the chassis out of the cabinet, and it was the jack. There was absolutely nothing wired or anything connected to the jack. So it was for a maybe someday in the future hopeful thing that they had, I guess, in their marketing department.
Yeah, right.
Steve, here's a historical artifact of Dr. Alexandriton's 1928 mechanical television lab.
Huh.
So it's keep your eyes out for there's all kind of stuff out there people haven't found yet. Because
I'm sure.
Another eBay find from about 12 years ago.
Fantastic. Yeah, I know you're right. We keep coming across things. Okay, let's look at our camera then. So Larry, go into the camera room. Okay, we'll start with the projector. There you go. This is a hodgepodge of new and old. This is a 60-line synchronous system that uses parts that the disc is old, the motor is old. We used a slide projector as a light source. It's old, but has nothing to do with television. And then the lens on the front is also from that era. But it's a 60-line disc, and as it rotates, there in the back is a very bright light bulb. Now, the original systems used arc lamps to generate enough light. This projected a raster onto the face or whatever was being televised. Go back to the frame, Larry. The frame where you stood in. Yeah, right. We've put this in here. It projected a raster, a 60-line raster, into that area. That's a test pattern that we use. But when we demonstrate this, we have somebody, we take that test pattern down and somebody can stand there. The light is reflected and picked up by this photocell cabinet to the right. There you go. Now, there were actually 4 of these photocell cabinets used, total of 8 photocells in the RCA's test. This is one of the 4. This shows how, I guess, ignorant some big museums can be. Not that we're not ignorant sometimes too, but this came from the Henry Ford Museum. They had all 4 of them and decided that 3 of them were surplus and sold the other 3, and we got one. Now, we've replaced the original photo tube. Go up top to the photo tube. There you go. There's the original one. It's huge, not very sensitive. And we replaced it with a photomultiplier tube just to make the thing work. And we demonstrate this to, there you go. We demonstrate this to people. And produces a pretty decent picture. On the, as I said, it's 60-line horizontal scanning, and we use the RCA receiver that was in the other room to, there you go, to demonstrate it.
If that's a pickup, why is it sitting in such a reflective surface? It seems like you'd want that to be all dark to pick up the light.
Well, it acts as a it collects. It's a reflector that reflects light, as much light as possible, into the photocell. That was the purpose for doing it. These photocells were incredibly insensitive.
This is not quite unlike the Dumont Vitascan system later for color.
Yeah, right.
Pretty similar.
Yeah.
Can I mention, Steve, an interesting thing about these kinds of scanners is that the light is going backwards, so that the slide projector and the disc there and the lens becomes the camera, even though the light comes out of it, and the receivers, the reflectors,
right,
and the photocells become the light sources,
right,
of how the picture looks in the end. So the result of this system here is that those look like, looking at the video result, those look like great big lights, floodlights, 2 floodlights over on the right.
Right. Yep.
Yeah, it's kind of counterintuitive, isn't it?
Steve?
Yeah.
What RPM rate did the discs operate at? And was there a standard, so to speak, or standards for the disc rotation?
No, there was not a standard. The rotational speed depended upon the frames per second. In this case, I think it was 900 RPM. I should mention Don Lee in Los Angeles was a pioneer in television, and Harry Lubke was his engineer. And they started with mechanical scanning with, I think, 80 lines was their original system. And then they went to, they kept increasing the number of lines. And before they got their electronic cameras, their final camera was a flying spot scanner that was, I think, 340 lines in the picture. The disc was inside of this is for film use. It obviously would not work for live pickup. It was for film use. Was inside a container that was evacuated. So there was a vacuum inside of it because the disc had to turn at such an incredible speed that the edge of it, the disc was about 4 feet in diameter, that it had to, it was exceeding the speed of sound by several times. So that was probably the ultimate in scanning discs. Any other questions about this?
I just wanted to mention about the Ford Museum. They had at one time a display of mechanical television artifacts, including a GE Octagon and some scanning equipment that you don't have, including prism rings from Jenkins that would deflect the scanning beam.
Right.
But one of the things about the GE Octagon is that they actually went to the trouble to make square scanning holes in their discs. And I've often wondered, what the machining technique was like to get those tiny square holes.
That's a good question. And to carry that one step further, we don't have an octagon in the collection, but we have a replica of an octagon that, as nearly as we can tell, was made in the 50s, because we read articles about GE made a number of replicas for their dealers to show off how advanced they were with their technology back in the 20s. And that disc has square holes in it. So somebody did it again in the 50s.
Maybe they were done with punches instead of drills.
Yeah, right. I think that makes sense.
I just wanted to tell you that this is exactly the right technology. The punches were developed for that time, and it were special hard metal punches for that particular disc punching in Germany. And I think what I need to do is, because I want to spin this a little further. I gave this talk many, many years ago when you had a television convention there in Ohio. And I want to show you the 441 line mechanical scanner that they used in Germany way beyond 1939 to scan movies. And I want to show you all of that. And I have to put a presentation together for that because it's so interesting. What they did was they made a bigger hole. Into that, they actually put a little diaphragm of metal into which they punched a rectangular hole. And that had a real problem because it sometimes clogged. And so the hanging chat may still be something that you may remember from that exactly happened with the same thing. And they had a lot of stuff to throw out at that particular time. So it was difficult to make, but the more difficult thing was the exact alignment of the scanning hole for this precision that you needed. I tried to recreate a 60 line scanning disk with square holes not too long ago because I wanted to build a scanner and mechanical television set for that. They couldn't do it with the CNC machine and they couldn't do it with the laser. I was so disappointed because nobody could come up with the precision needed to align the holes appropriately. So we have to give them a lot of credit for what they did with mechanical movements, and their jigs moved a tiny little bit in such precision. It's just unbelievable what they did in the 20s. We can't reproduce nowadays with lasers.
Wow. Amazing.
Yeah, I read a comment during that period that television will never be successful because there aren't enough machinists to make all those holes.
That shows why predicting the future is a perilous thing.
Well, mechanical television did predict the future in one respect by having a very tiny portrait formatted image, just like off of a cell phone.
It had no entertainment value. This is what they said.
Right. All right. Well, let's move on to the last thing. Somebody else have a comment?
Yes. I have a 1930s electrical engineering book and the radio physics, and it talks about television in the last chapter. And it shows talks about mechanical television, and it talks a little bit about using like a CRT, electronic television. And they say that the electronic is so complicated, we don't know how it's going to work. But they say that we do think that if it's going to have any real future, it have to be electronic.
Huh.
So I thought that was something. I got that book when I was 12 years old and thought it was, started reading it, and it's everything in there is still true today about radio physics or electrical stuff.
I want to tell you something just on that. Mechanical scanning for the longest time gave the superior image quality for reproduction of movies and film. I can tell you that for a fact because they tried it with all types of other scanners, but the mechanical scanner for the longest time had the superior image. And so this is why they were debating whether to continue with mechanical scanning or not. And this is why they developed in Germany the 441 line mechanical scanner for film. But it's a really interesting thing.
Okay, Larry, why don't you move back to the color mechanical set we have. As I mentioned before, we got two mirror screws were donated to the museum several years ago. And I thought it would be fun to see if we could make a color version using the mirror screw technology. And so we used the larger of the two screws that we had, mounted it on a synchronous motor that we had. Again, Daryl Hawk built us a custom converter to convert NTSC to 60 line RGB output, and built a light source that was about 4 inches long, made of a series of groups of LEDs, one for each of the three primary colors, and arranged right close to next to each other. It was quite a process to get them, because the resolution, the horizontal resolution depends upon how narrow that light source is. If it's too wide, then you lose resolution. You need something that, if you wanted 60 lines of horizontal resolution, the slot that the light source had to be something about 1/8 of an inch. And to get enough light out of LEDs uniformly with 3 different colors was quite a project. But we were successful and built this thing, and we demonstrated. As I mentioned before, it's very interesting to watch people look at it. Some people, as I said before, had to close one eye. I have to close one eye. I can't see it with 2. And you have to, as you move around, there are several spots where the picture comes in. So it's possible that you could have a number of people watching it around the circumference of the maybe 3 or 4 feet away from the scanner. So obviously on the left is the box containing the LEDs. If you look, I don't know, can you show the front of that box, or take a shot from of the little box, the side that's facing there you go, that's the side. I don't know if you can see it, but not very well. But anyway, you can't see it, but there's a very thin slot on the front of it. Interestingly, look down at the very bottom of the whole scanner. See the foam? The balance of the scanner on the top, where it's connected to the motor, isn't very good, the mirror screw. And so there's vibration. Now, Cliff Benham says next time he comes out, next time we have an event of some sort that he comes to, he'll fix that for us. But right now it makes quite a bit of noise and shakes and, rocks and rolls when it operates. Okay, that's my tour. Any more questions? And if not, we can just open it up for people to talk about whatever they want. Yeah,
Steve, I have a suggestion about your color mirror screw set. If instead of trying to get all the light out of one slot, the RGB, if you have 3 separate slots, a red slot, a green slot, and a blue slot, and the original image is where the red, green, and blue are shifted a little bit relative to each other, they'll come back in line in the final image. It's an engineering idea.
Yeah, I'm not sure how that would work. It seems to me like they'd be offset when you viewed them.
Right, but then in the converter, you offset the image to...
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, right. Well, we solved the problem. We got it plenty bright, but it just took a lot of experimentation.
That's good.
To get it working.
I wanted to just tell a little story about AC versus DC. I had a boss back at Motorola who had been a teenager in Germany during World War II. And he made a little extra money for the family because the Russian invaders would take transformer powered radios from the AC area and plug them in the DC area. And so he made money either converting the sets or rewinding transformers.
Well, that was the last thing on the tour. Does anybody have any?
Yes, Steve. When you're viewing the mirror screw TV with both eyes, do you get a double image?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's possible that wasn't the case with the original systems, because I didn't have much to go on in terms of the spacing, the distance between the light source and the screw. Possibly if it was in a different place, you wouldn't have that that result.
Convert it to 3D.
What's that?
Convert it to a 3D signal.
Yeah, right.
Steve?
Yeah.
This is an aside, but somebody mentioned that Los Angeles was still on 50 cycle AC up until 1948. When did electricity become standardized throughout the country?
I don't know the answer to that. Is anybody out there that does?
It depends on what you mean by standard. I know
60 cycle.
I understand. There was a power plant in Kansas supplying Missouri and Oklahoma with 25 cycle power up until 1999. To this day, I think Pennsylvania Railroad is still 25 cycle. There may be some others.
It is.
There was a lot of 25 cycle in the country because that was what Niagara Falls started out with. And so Canada and the U.S. had a lot of that. I just saw on the internet again, that looked like 48 was when Los Angeles converted over. So it depends. Like I said, I talked to a guy a couple of years ago about Pennsylvania Railroad, and I said, where do you get the 25 cycle? And he said, we have our own power plants to generate it. And same I heard about New Orleans. Their pumps were all 25 cycle, and the city had their own power plant to generate it. So it depends. You've got legacy equipment, and sometimes people need to keep running it.
When I lived in New York City in the early 60s, Lower Manhattan was still DC rather than AC.
Yeah, I was going to mention some places in Boston had DC in the early 1970s. I know that because somebody plugged a guitar amplifier into a DC socket and it went kablamo.
New York subway is 25 cycle. It was. I don't know how they probably still converted it over to 60, but well into the 70s, I'm pretty sure it was still 25 cycle because it was originally built as a AC distribution all the way through the subway system as AC, and then they converted with rotary converters at certain stations through the city to get to the 600 DC.
Well, I know in 1965 in New York City, they had some DC, and it kind of fed itself. So when November 1965, when it went down, they really had a problem bringing it back up again, because it was its own system there with a direct current. One more thing is in Western New York, it was 50 cycle, and I don't know for how long, but there was a portion out in Lockport, which is, of course, probably out of Niagara Falls or something out there, that was 50 and had to be converted. And I remember the old timers at that time telling me that they gave people money to buy new clocks and things with when they had to change the frequency to 60 hertz.
Something very interesting about Hollywood movie studios. They had to run their sound and camera equipment with synchronous motors in order to get synchronism. The sound recording device was in a building very separate from all of the sound stages. So they piped all the sounds underground in cables, in symmetric cables, interestingly, and they went to the sound recording building. And there they all had 48 hertz. Because they ran their synchronous motors for 24 frames per second, so they only had to have a half gear of transmission down to 24 frames per second. So that's a very interesting sidestep on that as well. And when they went on location, they could never plug in. So they had to bring their own power generation, a big van where they made the 48 hertz power. So a very interesting little side note on that. For the longest time, they did that.
I'd have to look back at the color book from 1951 in IEEE, but I think they talk in there about running the CBS color system and the lighting for the CBS color system, maybe at 48 hertz, because that was the frame rate. And back then you had heater to cathode leakage problems in the tubes, and that always created hum bars. So the CBS color system had, I believe, to be run on a special motor generators to feed the studio equipment.
You're absolutely correct.
Our camera that we have, our field sequential camera, the documentation for it talks about that, and it had a power supply that was 48 hertz.
I'd like to talk about the TV that I restored over the winter. But I restored a Magnavox MV20C in 1947 corner cabinet set. Let me see if I can get there we go. I was wondering, I don't know, do you have one of those in the museum?
We don't.
Okay.
Quite a nice looking set.
Yeah, somebody in December, somebody put it on Facebook Marketplace, and it was only about 20 minutes drive away from me. I spent more money shipping it to my house than I paid for it. There's the back. Let me look for a picture of it in my home. That's it.
Yeah.
So, and it hadn't been recapped. It had been repaired a few times. I think they retired the set around 1955, and it was on Long Island too. Originally, there was a service tag on it. I thought it was just such a beautiful set that I had to have it. So I did the full restoration only to prove that the CRT was a dud. Here's when I finished restoring it. You can see the video signal here on the scope, and it's connected right to the grid of the picture tube. And I checked the high voltage. Everything is lined up, and I can get really dim, sort of ghostly glows on this CRT. So I'm pretty sure there's my setup for testing it. And here's some more pictures of it. That's the chassis. It's such a nice big set, 1947. It must have been their top of the line model. There's the back view, and it's so strange looking because it looks like it's going to fall down. But all the weight is on the bottom. You see that? See how it's?
Yeah.
The picture tube compartment is way up there, and but all the weight is in the power supply chassis, the transformer there, so it's not going to fall. That's just sort of cantilevered out the back. Oh, and there's another quirk about the TV. You see, it's I asked them, does it have a channel 1 on it? And they said no. It does. It goes from channel 13 to 2, but you can click it one more click, and it's blank there. But it's obviously where channel 1 was. So all they did to the set when channel 1 was eliminated was they changed the dial on the channel selector to be blank where the 1 would be. But everything else is in there just as if channel 1 existed. Another quirk is some of the knobs you can see have been used more than the others. This one is all worn out. And the funny thing is the on-off switch here controls the contrast and instead of the volume. The volume is way, way back here. And the most often used knob is the vertical hold. So I can imagine it like assigning their child to stand right at the TV and keep the picture in hold. So that's it. But I was wondering what I need advice on is how I can find a 16AP4 picture tube for this, since nobody's
that's a very, very difficult tube to find, probably the most difficult. I would, some people have replaced the 16AP4s with one of the round, I can't remember which one, glass tubes, which is doable. So you might consider that. I can't remember which tube they used. I can look it up for you and get back to you. But a couple of people have used, like, I think it's a 16RP4 or something like that. But let me check for sure.
Would that also have magnetic focus?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll look into that. Thank you.
Okay, I'll get you that information. In fact, I could probably put you in touch with the people who have done it so they can tell you what was involved with it.
Terrific.
Chuck Conrad, how's the museum doing?
Oh, we've been pretty busy. We had, about 40, maybe 50 visitors today, which is almost out of control, but we're doing okay. And people keep bringing stuff. This morning, some guy brought us 1,000 tape cartridges, like they use in broadcast stuff, and they're nice ones too. They have nice labels on them, and they have commercials and music and stuff. I was warned by my friends up at the Museum of Broadcast Technology up in Woonsocket. They said, if you ever get this thing off the ground, you're going to find that trucks just back up to your door and start unloading. And that's actually been a really true prophecy. And sometimes it's a problem. It's especially bad when you see a pickup truck backing up to your door and it's got a whole bunch of black plastic TVs from the 1990s, the kind that Best Buy wants $25 to dispose of for you. And they would like to leave them with us. And we have to politely say, it was so nice of you to think of us, but we really can't accept this. We're really out of room, And we are out of room. This is a really scary thing.
Right. We have people go one step further.
Oh.
They come to the museum. We tell them we can't take it. They go around to the back and dump it.
Yeah, we've had that happen too, where they just left it. It's like, oh, swell, So we disguise them in plastic bags and put them in the trash. I mean, I'm sorry, but we're not paying $25 to dispose of the things. We try to find homes for them every now and then.
Right.
It's very hard to do, and they're just industrial waste at this point. Maybe someday they'll be really collectible, and maybe it'll be something that kids, teenage kids now that decide they want to restore TVs like you and I did and stuff. Might be a good place to start, actually, but so many of them are just not even. It's not even feasible to even think about fixing the things. It's a problem.
Yeah. We have a note on here in the chat about somebody wants to talk about the Traveler TV. Could they pipe in and tell us what they're looking for?
I saw in a previous picture somebody looked like they had a whole bunch of videotape recorders, either industrial videotape recorders behind them, with a couple pictures back.
Yeah, it looked like some of it was even what is the JVC had a digital format that was kind of like SVHS, but I think Fox used a bunch of them.
That's me.
There you go.
There you go. Looks like Betacam. Did you Betacams?
No, they are JVC D9 formats.
Oh, I see.
And the nice thing about it, one time, Fox did use them, but JVC will tell you at one point I was the largest user in the world for that format.
Oh, really?
No.
Because I was using them very successfully for maybe 3 more years after everyone else stopped using them, 4 years maybe. To the point that JVC was actually giving me brand new decks for free. And they paid the shipping. They said, either you want it or it goes to the dumpster. And if you want it, we'll ship it.
That's great. I wish Sony would have done that with Umatics and their recorders. You can't even get parts for them.
Okay, well, that was the last of the D9. I have now moved up to 4K HDR recording.
Okay.
Using a Varicam 35.
We've got a bunch of those JVC machines. 2 Fox stations brought everything they had to us, so we have quite a lot of them. Very few work, but
how about Umatics and BBUs? Do you have those?
We've got a few.
Okay, because I have a huge Umatic library. I have plenty of tape machines now, but not enough. I have some even 2-hour Umatics, which was very, very rare.
Well, finding one that works is a big problem. We've loaned one that works pretty well to some of the local TV stations when they're trying to pick up archives that they've got and they need it for a news story or something. I remember when George Bush Sr. died, that they had a whole bunch of video and we ended up transferring a bunch of it for them. But all the rubber parts go bad in these things.
Yeah.
The problem. Your belts go bad and the pinch rollers go bad, and you stick the tape in and you hear grinding noises, and when you take the cover off, it's turned into a big knot. And I really hesitate to mess with people's tapes with these things because it might be an irreplaceable tape and the machine just ate it. So that's not really good.
The BVU
one comment on those
50s and 900s were pretty reliable in that respect, but before that, the pneumatics were more terrible with rubber, no question.
Hey, Chuck, I'll just mention to you or to anybody else who's here, if by any chance anybody would like a VP 1000 pneumatic player, it snapped a belt, and I thought I threw it out, but I just found it the other day. So I will be throwing it out, but if anybody would like it, I know where one is, and just needed a belt last time I checked.
I'll give you a call.
Okay.
You guys are closer, so that's great. If you know somebody who's got a good, decent working 1-inch C format machine, we'd like to have one that actually works right. We've got a couple that will eat tapes and spew them out on weird things, and sometimes we can make them play, but they're pretty scary. And I guess it's mostly rubber parts. Once again, the pinch rollers get dry and hard, and it's pretty tough on them. But there are some around that work, and we do have a bunch of tapes. It would be nice to look at least, see what they do.
Well, if you have old videotape equipment of almost any format, you can always try the Library of Congress in Culpeper, because they take an awful lot of that stuff just so they have spare parts.
Well,
they have something like 39 million tapes that they still have to digitize.
Yeah, well, somebody's got their work cut out for them, that's for sure.
They've got a 50-year plan for it right now.
Well, that's good. I have maybe a 5-year plan, so we're hoping to be here for a long time.
50,000 hours of the pneumatic that I've got to digitize ultimately.
So can I ask you guys a question about what you're talking about there for a second?
Sure.
Are you saying that all of these VCRs I've been saving to play all my old VHS tapes are not going to be any good once I finally find someone to hook them up for me?
VHS were a little later. They weren't as bad as the early ones belt-wise, but there are minor repairs needed for those.
So you're mostly talking reel-to-reel kind of tapes?
Oh, that's not VHS. Is not reel-to-reel.
No, but I was wondering what rubber parts get rotten. Mr. Chuck said.
Double reel tapes. All the rubber parts go bad in those.
Yeah, they've all got them, and they're all about the same design, really. Usually, what goes wrong on the VHS machines first is the loading mechanism. That's all belt-driven, and you'll stick the tape in, it'll go in, but it won't come back out. It's kind of like the Roach Motel for VHS tapes.
Linda, they're talking about the Sony pneumatics mostly, which is a larger version of a VHS tape.
Well, okay. I've had the same experience with VHS machines, and as they got newer, the newer ones seem to be worse than the older ones because they figured out how to make them cheaper. You know, originally a VHS machine, the cheapest one was like $12.99 or something like that. It was an expensive machine.
So should I just convert all those tapes that I don't want to get rid of into?
Yes, absolutely.
Can I make one warning to her though?
Yeah.
You're going to convert it to a DVD.
And those fall apart faster than VHS.
Yes. The Library of Congress can still play magnetic tapes with Adolf Hitler giving speeches.
Yeah.
I don't guarantee a single DVD in their archive that's older than 10 years, which is why they copy them every 5 years.
So then do I just leave them?
Copy them so you can see them if you want to see them, and just put the tapes in a cool, dry place just in case you ever want to regenerate it again, because chances are you can play the tape back sooner than you can the DVD.
See, that's what I was afraid of, because I know that DVDs just deteriorate.
Well, some do worse than others.
Well, convert it to
Linda, you convert them to files and just keep them as files. How many tapes do you have?
Oh, well, I have quite a few because I like VHS, but I have like the original Jungle Book that my mom put on a VHS before she died. And so it's the one with Olivia de Havilland and whatever. And so I really kind of like keeping that tape because it was my mother's. But then I have videos of my children through school, and those I'd like to convert to some sort of digital format. So
how many tapes do you have that you want to save?
less than 100, more than 30.
Oh, okay. I do tape conversion for fun, but that's a little too many for me. I just finished one right now.
Well, it's real time consuming, but for about $59.95 or so on Amazon, you can buy a little converter box by Pinnacle. And if I could reach over here, I could probably even pick one up. I don't know if the cable
converts to MPEG 4.
Well, see, okay, I bought one of those to convert vinyl before vinyl came back again. And it really stunk at dividing the tracks. And then I also tried to convert cassette tapes. I bought a cassette tape converter, and that thing was garbage.
This one works very well. I've been using it all day today.
Oh.
Yeah. I've had good luck. It's wired into this computer I'm talking to, so I don't really want to yank it out because I might go away. But it's a Pinnacle Dazzle. It's called. It comes complete with video editing software. Pinnacle's software is not too bad. I think I paid $59.95 for it on Amazon, and it does a good job behind me. Well, actually, if I move the camera over, you can see there's an SVHS machine, but it plays back VHS just fine. And it does a pretty good job of converting to digital files, which you store on your hard drive, or if you want, onto a thumb drive.
Or even in the cloud.
Or on multiple things.
I would mention some people might disagree with me, but I'm a big fan of you want to keep a good copy locally, but you can put a copy on YouTube or on the Internet Archive, and it has at least a fighting chance of sticking around if you lose your thumb drive or your DVD goes bad.
Yeah, this started for me putting church services on YouTube. And I started digitizing a bunch of VHS and SVHS things that I had shot a long time ago, and put them on YouTube, and they're there probably forever. I mean, I don't think you can get them off of YouTube once you get them on.
I would agree completely because I also do this for archival purposes. My main purpose, however, is telecine because I scan and restore 35, 16, 8mm film and digitize that and put that on. I have an account on Vimeo. That's a private account, so not everybody can look at your particular files. And I upload it to Vimeo, and I can show it to anybody, and I can watch it everywhere. And the quality is very, very good if you do this in the correct way. So I would recommend you put it on a private account on Vimeo or something like that. And then
not Dropbox or Google.
Dropbox is not recommended because this is not optimized for video. That's optimized for file storage. So something where you actually have a built-in video display is Vimeo or YouTube. YouTube can get a little sketchy if you have certain things like a video that is a commercial film or whatever. They won't even let you upload because of content.
Yeah, like the Jungle Book one.
They won't let you upload, but Vimeo will. On a private account, if you keep it private, that's a very good thing. There's Vimeo that's free. You can only upload so much over the time, but I think that may be enough for you if you do it over time. And there's a paid account where you can upload as much as you like. And it's really, really good. And I highly recommend it that you have it in a cloud server, as I call it, because a cloud server means somebody else's computer. If yours crashes, theirs most likely will be backed up and will be up in no time. And this is really a very good way of keeping this around. And
in the case of the family mementos, if I don't do it before I die, my children won't do it. They'll just put them in Google.
You need to do it. I do the same thing. And I have all the old movies and all the movies that the clients send me on Vimeo. And I say, okay, this is where it goes, and if you want to keep it up there, get your account and I'll upload it to your account if necessary. So
just put them on a couple hard drives.
I think that's not a bad idea too. Yeah. I could give each kid a hard drive for Christmas with the
they'll crash. You have to be prepared that they only have a half-life that's not very long. And
you do multiple hard drives.
Yeah,
exactly.
So you could do hard drives and the cloud.
The problem with the hard drive is the recordings industry found problems where they would record the master of groups, put the hard drive on the shelf, pull it off maybe 10 years later and found that the head has frozen itself to the disc, so they can't play it back.
Exactly.
I had 7 hard drives die one time, so the multiple drive thing doesn't always work.
Vimeo, some of these cloud servers, get up there, put it up there, and you'll be happier with being able to retrieve it.
Well, just do both. I mean, why not? It's not that much extra trouble.
No.
Once you've digitized the thing, you can share it all kinds of places. And one of the cool things about having it on a cloud or something is that you can have your kids watch it on their cell phone if they feel like it. I mean,
or my grandkids,
Well, your grandkids, whoever. You don't need any particular, hardware or anything. They already got it in their pocket.
I probably haven't made a DVD in 10 years. I don't even know if I could at this point.
The one thing you got to watch, Linda.
I haven't done it in a long time either. So,
do I have a watch?
The one thing you got to watch, Linda, is when you're digitizing, just like with a visibly hard system, you need to use the fastest, in this case, writing rate. Because if you choose a slow, shall we say, writing rate for the DVD, the analog to digital software, you'll see a very noticeable change in the frame rate. Whereas when you went with the slower speed in VHS, you had a loss of detail content.
Right.
But when you do it to digital, you find the frame rate doing something less, in some cases much less, and very noticeably less than the 30 frames, or actually 29.97 frames per second that the eye is used to in television. To digital.
Okay. That's interesting. That's very good.
The only downside of using that higher frame rate is that the file size will end up being larger.
So does that Pinnacle have a good frame rate, Mr. Conrad?
It'll depend on
I think he's mixing up a term there. Video and going into the Pinnacle 2997, it's going to go into the computer 997. The problem is after you compress it, the bigger the data rate, the better the quality. The lower the data rate, the worse the quality.
Yeah.
You're not going to lose frames, but the picture will start to look blurry and blocky if you go to a lower data rate.
Yes.
Now, the thing that will save you is we have better compressions. H.264 now is what most people are using, which is pretty darn good. H.265 is out there, but not everyone has got it. And H.266 is out for comments right now.
Don't use the ones for comments. They're not going to come to your way soon. 264 is okay. The frame rate is not going to change, and you will be happy with it. However, you need to make sure you can play it back.
Right.
Put it to you this way, Linda. I use H.264 on all my stuff here at home.
Okay. And is that convert to so I focused on this name Pinnacle that Chuck Conrad mentioned. Is that, are we talking the same sort of a thing? His thing to convert to digital format? That's your cue, Chuck.
It gives you a whole choice of a whole menu of how you would like to record this, and my recommendation would be the highest quality you can, because it will know it once you make copies off of the lowest quality that you recorded on, it's not going to get better if you re-record it at higher quality. But
I mean, we're still talking
this thing's made pretty much for the consumer. I mean, it's a consumer piece, but it works pretty good. I mean, I was really surprised because I remember buying video capture cards in the 1990s that cost like as much as a car or something. And here it is for $69.95 or $59.95, I think. And they gave you some video editing software so you can go fix the stuff and get rid of the parts that you don't like.
Chuck,
yes.
What's the model number of that Pinnacle?
Well, I don't know. It says it's called Pinnacle Dazzle, and unfortunately it's plugged in.
Okay, well, Dazzle is good enough for now. I guess.
In all honesty,
I think you'll find it that way.
Well, Chuck.
Yes.
If you have the Pinnacle, you can probably answer this question, which will make her happy. The Pinnacle takes the video and audio, positive video, correct?
It takes composite video or
okay.
or
Chances are the composite processing that it even feeds into the Pinnacle exceeds the capability of your VHS player.
Yeah, I agree. I'm quite sure that's true. So,
and it's simple to operate because all of my spare brain power I have to reserve for using my embroidery machine.
Well, it's pretty simple. Now, I've used a video editing program before, so maybe I didn't. But actually, I taught 2 people at my local church how to use it. They use it all the time, and
I can.
And they figured it out. So
video. Yeah, I can fumble around with video. I actually have a master's in instructional technology.
Oh well.
So I theoretically should be able to do it.
Well, now it may be made for idiots, and if you're smart, you may not be able to figure it out.
No, I'm definitely on the idiot side.
Okay.
Well, Linda, I put the one that I use every day in the chat.
Okay.
If you click on chat, you'll see the one I use.
Okay.
And it works very well.
Well, I almost bought one of those when I bought the Pinnacle, but I wasn't sure, and I knew Pinnacle because I'd used their software before, and that's the only reason I went with this. But there are others out there, and they work fine, and they're not all that expensive. So that's the best way to. Your big problem is getting a good VHS machine that works and works reliably and doesn't eat your tapes up. I'm using some SVHS machines that are industrial, because they're just a little beefier, and you can buy those pretty cheap now because nobody wants one.
I'm using a JVC SVHS, and luckily it still works fine.
Okay, well, I have a JVC, and actually it's a Panasonic behind me, but I got JVCs too. But they're good. It was actually a pretty good format, and it plays back VHS tape just fine.
Yeah,
it looks okay.
Well, what do you make you jealous? I have 5 JVC 822 SVHS.
What do you do with those?
What?
What do you do with them?
I used to do video production with them, and then I evolved over to. But now and then, I have a customer that asks me to work on stuff. Now, unlike you, I do go the further extent, though, that I will bring it into a real editor, which has lots of tools. I'll do a lot of processing on it. If I need even more work, I'll send it up to Cinefilm and have them do the processing, where for very cheap, I'm pulling on maybe 100,000 computers to process my video for me, to get rid of noise or anything else, and clean up the video. But that's a lot of time to learn how to do it.
Yes, that's...
For me to restore a 2-hour video might take me a week.
Yeah.
It looks pristine, better than VHS ever looked.
You'll have to give us a demo of some of that sometime.
One thing to keep in mind is all in real time. So if you have a 2-hour VHS tape,
yes, 2 hours.
It takes 2 hours to record it, and then once you have it in your computer, it's a really long file. So it just takes time and patience. And it's not a good idea if you're digitizing a tape on your computer to decide you're going to go log into Facebook while you're waiting or something. Highly not recommended.
Good point.
Chuck, when you digitize it, what format do you digitize to?
Usually just to a AAC, what is it? 4, I think it's called. But,
MP4.
MP4. There we go. MP4. Sorry.
Okay, so you go straight to the digitized format and then put it on hard disk.
Yeah, and it looks okay.
The reason I'm asking is I always go to ProRes HQ. Okay.
Well, I'm not doing. These are tapes that aren't all that swell to begin with, so there's really not much point. And I was just really doing it just to save them before the tapes disintegrate all by themselves, or I no longer can find a machine that plays them.
Well, what I was going to say to you to pass on, because you have the Pinnacle, what's the best format you can digitize to out of the Pinnacle so that she doesn't choose a very poor option?
I honestly don't know. I pick MP4 because that's pretty standard. And
well, then, yeah, what bit rate do you use?
I couldn't tell you offhand. I haven't turned it on in the last 6 months probably, but I was using it. It's still plugged in the computer.
Okay.
Sorry.
I have some stuff on MPEG 2 and MPEG 4, and it's amazing how much difference there is in the file size for the same picture.
Oh yeah, but I've been a happy camper for $59.95. You know, I mean, for my purposes and probably her purposes, I think it works. And there are there are other alternatives, and there are certainly much better ones. You know, I mean, but I'm not talking about, you know, something that somebody's going to make money off of or anything. I used to make videos of car shows and things, car tours and stuff, and I thought it'd be a pretty good idea, antique cars. And I used to, at one point, it seemed like it would be a good idea to post them on YouTube. So go look on YouTube. There's a Chuck Conrad channel. There's not a whole lot there, but it looks at least as good as the VHS copy originally did. So I'm pretty reasonably happy with it. And I think for most people who are just trying to save family memories and things, it works.
I want to thank all of you guys for being so friendly and helping me. And I've got lots of links that I'm going to look at. I really do appreciate it. It was my first meeting and I've really, really enjoyed myself. So I hope I can come back every month.
Well, good.
Yeah, it's interesting that a museum of early television is discussing videotapes.
Yeah, right. No, we have, well, at the Texas Broadcast Museum, we got a lot of videotape stuff.
Yeah,
we're a little bit newer. We don't have any. I would love to have a mechanical TV, but we don't. You know, our emphasis seems to be post-war for sure, and maybe a lot of it's post-Vietnam War even. But
yeah.
You know,
hey, Steve, are you still on?
I am.
I just wanted to comment. I've said this at previous meetings, but you know, for all the number of times that I've walked around the museum and looked at things and poked around, this was far more informative than any time that I actually spent physically in the room with those damn mechanical sets. So thank you. This was great.
Yeah, I agree, because I wandered around through there and looked at them and go, well, that's really interesting, but I didn't know the story behind it. And
right,
running the museum, actually, a lot of this has to do with the story that goes with it. We like to have our visitors at our museum do a guided tour. I mean, they're welcome to wander around, and there's a little sign in front of things that tells you what it is. But until they hear the story, it really doesn't make sense to them. And what Steve did today, doing the story on these things, all of a sudden, a lot of that makes a lot of sense now.
Yeah, and I've given people
and the video, the live video was so good too.
I was going to say, I've given people a little bit of a tour through that mechanical television room, and I'm just realizing right now what a truly terrible job I did when I did that.
Yeah.
Well, Steve.
Well, thank you.
What you want to do is go out and get yourself an 85-inch OLED TV set. Get a recording of the opening of the Tokyo Olympics, which was broadcast in 8K, and store it so that 50 years from now you can show them what antique TV was.
Well, if I had any chance of being around in 50 years, I might do that.
It's too bad it was boring TV, though. It was, most
that's terrible.
Opening ceremonies, I think.
It was terrible.
50 years ago, TV, 50 years ago?
No, we're talking last night.
Oh, okay.
The Olympic opening ceremonies.
Oh, that was terrible.
Well, Chuck, as I said to you on Facebook, I was really lucky to be an invisible assistant, lowly nobody at for ABC Sports at the 1976 Olympics, and I got to tell you that completely turned me into a convert for Olympics. I just love them, and I watch them, and I just absolutely I'm thrilled with it every time it comes on.
Well, I can understand that for sure, and you know, your experience is one I haven't had of working the Olympics, but I was kind of surprised on the opening ceremonies. They're usually more spectacular, and what I think bugged me the most, because I've made my living doing audio for years, and what bugged me was the audio. It sounded like they had a microphone hanging out a window somewhere, picking up the live sound. There was no feed. The music sounded like it was being phoned in from across the street or something.
Yeah.
The announcers were fine. They sounded okay. But
well, you do understand one thing about this Olympics that you've never seen before. All of the audio, all of the camera feeds are being sent to New York for processing. There's no one in Tokyo doing it.
Well, that's how ESPN's working too. So That they send it to Bridgeport, Connecticut instead of New York. But yeah, I understand that may have a lot to do with it.
So there might not be someone sitting in the room and saying, hey, what I'm hearing in my headset's the same as if I stick my head out the window.
Well, I know the ESPN announcers have a real tough time because they're not at the game, really. So they're missing a whole bunch of the other stuff that goes on around. They're just seeing what we're seeing on the camera.
Also,
that's hard to do.
I'm cold.
Yeah, I know. That's why I tried.
Well, I spent 34 years working for my boss, Ray Dolby, one of the inventors of videotape recording. And we had a guy, Jim Hilson, who worked in the sound truck at the Olympics for many years, getting the sound feed high quality.
It used to be stunning, I thought. In fact, the last Winter Olympics I saw that was from Japan, and this is back in the days of NTSC. We're talking in the 70s sometime. I was blown away by the production value, and the video quality was incredible on NTSC, and I was just kind of disappointed, I guess. It looked more like a Zoom meeting. Sorry.
I have to agree with you. The production has gone down because they're trying to make a buck instead of do it right.
Yeah, well, there's that. I have a feeling NBC is going to lose their butts on this one because I don't think many people are listening, and it cost the earth to do this. And, they had to pay IOC a fortune to do this. So we'll see.
Participants are dropping like flies here. I'm watching the numbers on the bottom. Before anybody else goes, is there anyone with experience archiving the SSD or the flash drives?
Well,
the solid state drives or the flash drives?
I put them on flash drives before.
I'm doing it all the time.
But for long-term storage?
I don't know about that.
Oh, no.
But it works fine for the minute. In fact, at our museum, we've got all kinds of videos running. They're running off of a little digital media player that costs $36, and it's got a USB stick that sticks in it, and the video's in it. Works fine. It looks okay to me.
Somebody said earlier that DVDs are deteriorating after 5 years. I've been playing stuff that I made 20 years ago.
That's not what I said.
What did you say?
I said that the Library of Congress refreshes DVDs every 5 years because they don't trust it. That doesn't mean you can't have stuff that's old. I have some stuff that is very old on DVDs. Back to 2000. They're still fine.
Right.
Also, I always do 2 or 3 copies from 3 different manufacturers when I archive to a DVD. And then I'll pull one out to play one. And yeah, one of the discs is totally deteriorated.
What about M discs?
They're run by one manufacturer. And
what about M?
Pull out one of the good ones. I make another copy of it, put it back in there when I'm done. And 20 years from now, I probably can play it again.
What are M discs?
Different recorder, different manufacturer of the disc. Anytime I archive, and I do 3 different flavors.
What about M discs? Aren't they supposed to have longer life?
I think so. But I also remember on the thumb drives and the solid state memory, I saw an article very recently, about 2 years, that also says only give them like 5 years to store the stuff. Because what you're doing is you're putting a charge in an integrated circuit, and those electrons will tunnel out, and eventually you'll forget what's on the chip. They were never designed for long-term storage. Okay. And the other problem you've got is you're finding an awful lot of fakes now, which are really cheap chips versus good chips, even though it still might have the name Kingston or something like that on it. Because now people are counterfeiting them.
What's the best brand of DVDs?
I don't have a good answer to that.
It starts with an M.
Maxell?
No, it's 3 letters.
Triple M, 3M?
The only term I can tell you on Maxell, and I will say they're good, because I can't think of the 3-letter one you're talking about right now, but I know who you're talking about.
It's an archival quality.
I got a whole bunch of DVD Maxell archival quality, because they were designed for the medical instrumentation business where doctors had to store patient records for 10 years. Right. The trouble is they put a little bead on it right around the rim, which they said adds a little structural strength. The trouble is they removed the ability to print on it. So all of a sudden they had thousands of these discs that they couldn't sell because people all of a sudden now had these inkjet printers that they could print on it. So I got a whole bunch of, I think I bought 5,000 for dirt cheap. From Maxell archive quality selection.
Wow.
They couldn't use them. No one would buy them.
That's a lot of DVDs, 5,000.
Well, I find I'm still making money with DVDs.
Do they have an expiration date?
$300 for 5,000 because they said they couldn't market them, even though they're archive quality. And I said, I bought enough for the rest of my life.
But do they have an expiration date? Will they always be as good to record on?
Yeah, as far as recording, yes.
Okay.
I've been using these for a while.
They're good. DVDs are good. The problem is they come in two flavors. If they're gold, they don't oxidize. If they're aluminum, they can oxidize. So the slightest failure of sealing those two layers of plastic together during manufacturing eventually could allow air to leak in, and it can be very slowly. But as it gets in there, it oxidizes the aluminum, and you can't play it back anymore.
Well, this is not.
But the gold cost a lot more.
Television museum.
Enjoy tonight. This is Chuck Azar. I'm signing off. Good meeting again tonight, and I hope everybody has as much enjoyment out of it as I have. Talk to you guys later.
Okay. Take care.
Yeah, nice talking to you.
I'm going to sign off too. I haven't had dinner yet. It's 9:12, and I'm getting hungry. So have a good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Steve, thank you so much for a really good evening. I've enjoyed hanging out and listening and watching.
Is Steve still there?
Steve signed off a couple minutes ago.
Okay.
But,
now you have to talk to the meeting host.
Okay.
Talk to the hand.
No, the TV set.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad everybody had a good time.
Yes.
It's always fun.
How many people were on YouTube?
There's usually about 17 people tune in on YouTube. I don't know why. I just looked on YouTube. There's a running commentary in the chat of people asking all kinds of questions. And of course, A, nobody was monitoring it. And B, it was running like max headroom. It was 2 minutes into the past, I guess. So I suggested that they might want to join us on Zoom, but some people just seem to prefer YouTube.
And what's the most that were on Zoom tonight? 46, was it?
I think so. Yeah, I always worry that we're going to max out the 100 people, but we came close one time, but so far not a problem.
Dave, I thought I saw about 52 or 3 in there at
Could
one
be.
time.
Well, don't forget, 2 of them were me. I keep my laptop running on the side because it's absolutely impossible to manage all the microphones on an iPad. So I do all the back office stuff over on the laptop here. But anyway,
I have a question for E. Grogan. I've got a I think it's a PAL professional VHS thing in the basement. I have to get the model out. But are you interested in any PAL devices?
No, but I'm sure the Library of Congress would want it.
Okay, thanks.
As I said, it's the people in Culpeper.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I know them.
Where is Culpeper?
Virginia.
West of Washington, D.C.
Okay. In
Great
Virginia.
Tour. I'm the historical chair of the Audio Engineering Society, and we did a really nice tour of Culpeper a year or so ago. It was great fun to see that place. It's huge.
Oh man, I would love to do that.
There's another one. There's another one there's another one coming up, I believe, next year. Great tour.
If you're interested, contact the SMPTE organization in DC. They tend to schedule one every year or two, and it's been a while since they've had the last one.
Yeah, Audio Engineering Society does it also.
And usually those people get nice private tours where they show you a lot more than the typical people see.
That's right. Okay, off to dinner. Enjoyed the evening. Take care, everybody.
All right. Bye, Bill.
Bye, Bill.